Okay, great. So the recording has started, just waiting for people to filter into the room a minute, and then we'll kick off in just a sec. Okay, so as people are coming in, I'll start. So welcome everybody to the panelists and everybody joining us to today's EcoPrint webinar. Does print need an eco standard is the question that we're looking at today. Pretty complex question that we have an hour to figure out, so I'm sure we'll solve it by the time everybody has finished talking today. Got a great team of people kind of on the case to talk about that, but I think it's better if they introduce themselves. I'm Karis Kopp, FuturePrint EcoPrint, and I'll be leading the discussion, but I'll let you guys introduce yourself. I'm going to go from just where I can see you. So Isabel, why don't you kick off and tell us about you and your role?
Yes, sure. Okay. I'm Isabel. I'm working at EcoPrint as a sustainability manager. And we're an online marketplace for customized print products, and we're serving a lot of European countries currently. And I think, just good to know is that we don't have any printing facilities ourselves. We see a lot of different certifications and labels, etc. That's why I think it's really relevant for us to also be included in this discussion to understand what would be the benefits or maybe the cons of implementing an industry standard.
Fantastic. And Charles, if you could introduce yourself. Still you're on mute at the moment.
Sorry, that's better.
Yeah.
Thank you, Karis and EcoPrint for setting this up. My name is Charles Van Rij. I'm a global lead for printing, print and paper for Cradle to Cradle certified. Cradle to Cradle Product Innovation Institute is an institute. We are independent, a non-profit organization, and we are more than a decade present globally. We certify products based on the cradle to cradle principle. So everything is a resource for something else. And we are leading multi-attribute standard used for verifying products. And we certify products on their safety and circularity, and the organization on the way it is made, if it is produced in a responsible way. So that's actually my intro.
Fantastic. John, you're next on my clock there. If you could go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Karis. Yeah, thanks for the invitation. I'm John Hutton. I work for Economy, and for the last 20-some years, my career has been positioned in the waste and recycling industries, specifically for printing in the UK. And the latest mission is to bring sustainability to the graphics industry and show some transparency in the reality of recycling and waste management throughout manufacturing, and that's where I'm sit.
Fantastic. And Tom, over to you.
Yeah, afternoon all. I'm Tom Maskell. I'm the Sales and Marketing Director at Webmart. We're a UK-based sustainable marketing agency and certified B Corp. We have a lot of sustainability initiatives on the go, particularly with regards to print, mail, POS and postage in the UK, particularly around accurately accounting for the impact that they have on the environment, and then reducing the impact these marketing campaigns have on the environment without having a negative impact on return.
Fantastic. And you're going to introduce your friend behind you there?
The gorilla, yes. Everybody should have a 7-foot gorilla in their office, I think.
And Nathan, over to you. You're last on my grid there.
Hi, thanks, Karis. So I'm Nathan Swinson-Buller, Managing Director of ImageCo in Leeds in the UK. We're technically a wide format printer, but we do loads of crazy projects from retail display to exhibitions, events. We've won a lot of awards for our work and our efforts into sustainability, and which is why I'm on this panel today. Sustainability is a kind of key thing to our business and to my heart as well. So it's good to participate, and especially to learn more about this eco standard that I'm intrigued about.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. And we may have another participant joining at some point, but I think we can go ahead and kick off. There we go. Perfect timing. Hi, Nathan.
Sorry, everybody.
No problem at all. It was absolutely perfect timing because I just introduced everybody else. So if you won't mind just introducing yourself and a little bit about what you do.
Fab. Afternoon, everybody. My name's Nathan, one of the co-founders of Carbon Quota, and we are here today, or I am here today, to contribute to this conversation, really from the viewpoint of carbon footprinting and how that can be used to measure environmental impact. Fantastic.
There we go. That's everybody. We have Marcus. Everybody knows Marcus. He's here as well. If you have a question, he's I think going to be keeping an eye on some of those questions, and I will as well. So there is a Q&A function if you do want to ask a question to any of our panelists or jump in with your thoughts on anything, please do that. I'm not sure if I said already this, but this will be recorded as well. So and if anybody wants to watch again, or anybody's missing it, or you have to jump out part of the way through, then it is going to be available shortly after the call. So yeah, I think we can probably dive straight into the conversation. I think it's important to say first that the reason we decided to ask this question about the eco standard, do we need an eco standard, is because we at EcoPrint put together a survey in partnership with HiCon that looked at sustainability in digital print technology. One of the questions was, what would you consider the main barriers and challenges to improve production and industry performance towards net zero? And the top response was actually lack of industry legislation, standards and enforcement, which is what led us to that question. We've had a little discussion ahead of time, all of us. So I think one of the great places to start, we do want to kind of look at what it would look like if there was an eco standard, why it would be beneficial, or what the disadvantages or risks might be, but also how, where would you even begin? How would you start? So I think maybe if we start there, I know we've got two Nathan T and I got Nath. I'm going to call you Nath, and I think you were the one that jumped in first with where would we start. So why don't you talk about your kind of thoughts on that, concerns about where we would start, and what your kind of immediate reaction to that is.
So is that for me, Nath?
Yeah, I know. Do I need a better Nathan system?
Just Nath. No, it's fine. It's cool. For me, I think we spoke about it briefly yesterday. It's where do you start, and how do you look at an eco standard that generalizes printing? We look at how the technology we have, from latex to kind of LED, the different suppliers, different manufacturers, over to kind of the web print, your litho, and there's so many different manufacturers of ink, let alone everything else that encompasses what I think should go under an eco umbrella. Is how do you start in it? Is it part of a bigger thing, like from waste management, almost like an ISO certification? Is it more of a your waste management, your inky technology, or is it just purely print and media? So where it's I'm kind of like, I don't know an answer to that right now, so I think it'd be quite good to get everyone else's opinion on where there could be a starting point and how that could be looked at.
Yeah, I think so. I'll just jump in there. I think our approach as to where you start with improving your environmental impact is to work out where you are today as a base point. So the first step we always have is calculate. So what is the actual environmental impact of what you're doing today? And the second step then is the most important step, which is mitigate, and how can we reduce it as far as possible before moving on to things like offsetting and communicating what that impact is. But for us at Webmark, any starting point has got to be, what is the environmental impact? Because until you know that, and until you know that in kind of granular detail, you don't know where to put your time and effort and money to have the biggest impact.
Yeah, I think that kind of talks to the complexities of it. I think that's a great, for a business that wants to be more sustainable, that's such a great starting point. But I think on the other side of it is where we get started with an eco standard is so difficult, because there is all those differences. So it's I think we did talk a bit yesterday about in terms of getting started, is that why? Is it kind of a box ticking exercise that if there was a standard, we need to kind of know why that's being done? I think Isabel, I think you talked about, you know, there's the move to be more sustainable, or is it just making you more administrative? You know, are you, if there is that standard, are you just kind of working towards that arbitrary goal instead of a company like you, Tom, or Nathan SB, that kind of actually took it upon yourselves to look at where you are and how you make those changes? So Isabel, I guess it maybe to you on kind of need to look at that why first of all, don't you, in terms of why you're doing it and who benefits as well?
Yeah, I think great question to start with, why, because, and I think, why do we need it? So I would be a pro, but I do understand that, of course, the implementation and the design of like setting such an eco label is going to be super hard because of the different techniques and materials, etc., that are there. But I think in general, the print industry has quite a bad name if you think about it on a sustainability level. And I think there we really need to set some guidelines. We need to set the bar higher, so people also know that companies are going to adhere to minimum standards around printing to improve environmental practices, maybe also looking on the social side of printing, think about employee health and safety, for example. And I think that's that. And also the why behind an eco label is not indeed to make it a very administrative task. It should rather be a framework, right, that guides you towards being a better organization, ensuring your license to operate. And I think that should be more also the goal behind it, rather than just putting that label there without even anyone knowing what it actually truly means. And it should be more an enabler for companies to become better, rather than I don't know, a tick in the box, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if I bring in Nathan T on this as well, because I know as well from our previous conversation, you used the kind of analogy of a different industry. I think it was the construction industry, where, you know, that they're all kind of going, they have to meet a certain standard, and it's not actually moving the cause forward of sustainability.
Exactly, and I think I'll get to that in a moment, Karis. Actually, just to pick up on Isabel's point, you know, print perhaps having a bit of a bad name when it does, and I think where we've seen companies progress really, really well through their decarbonisation journey or their sustainability journey, whatever you want to call it, is when they start to acknowledge, oh, actually there is an impact on carbon and climate change, there's water, there's land use change, there's raw material extraction, there's forestry, you name it, there's an impact, and there's air pollution, all sorts of things. And I think once you start to acknowledge that, then you can start to, as Tom says, you can start to measure it, deal with it, understand it. Okay, now what can I do about it? But I think, Karis, back to your point about construction industry, you know, the construction industry, steel, glass, buildings, etc., they are probably 10 or 15 years ahead of the print industry. They were having these conversations a decade ago. Now, my observation, I'm not in the construction industry, obviously, we're in the print industry, but my observation in the construction industry is when you kind of get close to it, is they've got these very complicated, they call them environmental product declarations, these very complicated processes, life cycle assessments of these materials, and they overwhelm themselves with complex data that's impenetrable to most people. An architect or an engineer or a surveyor, they're looking at it, it doesn't help them make decisions. So I think if there is going to be a standard in print, it has to be something that's dead simple and some sort of grading or some sort of indication that says, okay, that's that. I know that is a better thing to go for, so therefore I'm going to do that, and then I'll look at the cost and the quality and everything else. But yeah, I think the danger is going too complicated and making it too scientific and too academic. It becomes meaningless. I think that's a danger we've got to avoid, and we can.
I personally think one way would be more collaboration. Like Nathan, we use yourselves for the carbon reporting, John we use for waste management, because you know, once we try and avoid all the paperwork, there will be a lot of paperwork if you don't collaborate. So with you guys, you know, when I reached out to you when you did our carbon report last year, and I wouldn't have a clue. Before I met you, I didn't know what Scope 1 emissions were, you know, and then I'm going on a learning journey speaking with Dominic. But it's like the same for waste management. You know, John comes in like, you know, do what you're doing with the waste. And then it's almost like you guys, the production partners can tick that box. So you become like so it's, you know, you're using this material, using this waste management, this carbon reporting, and then you tick these boxes to then become, you know, you've got certain, you know, maybe, I don't know, 5 criteria out of 8, for example, to kind of qualify for this eco. A little bit like the Reconomy logo with FESPA, you know, if you use it in doing this Reconomy recycling, you get a little badge to say you are managing your waste properly. And it's the same for any part of the business, because there is an awful lot of work behind what needs to be done to get that certification, as in ISO 14001 is a similar thing. But the paperwork, it's a full-time job almost for someone. The legislation changes almost daily, so it needs to be updated. And whoever's changing this, you know, I think it's absolutely pointless. But there are these changes made that you need to adhere to get to this point and keep up with that. So it needs to be made simple, and I think it can be done by supply chain and by services from the likes of yourself.
So you kind of think it can be, it's I think one of the challenges as well is this industry and all the other industries it touches, and kind of quantifying that, you know, that chain as well. I think that's something that is challenging and does make it difficult to make something that simple. I think maybe if Charles, if I bring you on that as well. I know that
we have, of course, as Cradle to Cradle Product and Innovation Institute, quite some experience with certifying products. And yeah, like you like to keep it simple, but you always end up in a quite tight program where you have to get certified. For example, if you want to test the product on safety, you have to know what's in the product. So you have to connect in the value stream, and you have to. It's quite a job to do, and often this takes about 80% of the time of the certification. And so by saying, yeah, we need a standard for our industry, which should be easy and not giving too much administration. It always comes along, administration with it, especially when you want to be very, you want to keep the standard high. But the certification process is, once you get your certification for your product, cradle to cradle, it's a journey. So you get on board and you certified, you're on a certain level. So we have levels from bronze till platinum. And we challenge you every 2 to 3 years. We challenge you to recertify and also see if you make improvements on the different levels, on safety, circularity, but also on your social fairness or water soil stewardship. So we actually have this holistic view, and it's not simple to get a certification, but you need to keep the standard high. That's our vision.
Yeah, if I can just add something to that, I think indeed, like, of course, every certification or legislation or label comes with administration. So I think that's also a little bit like understanding to what extent are people committed to obtain it, right? So I think there's also kind of a minimum level required to actually make it valuable, because you need to put effort into it. I just think there's a different, like, having like administration as a mean, or is that making sure that you put then the right projects or actions into place with a desired outcome? And I think that would be a very big requirement to make it successful, at least indeed to create kind of continuous improvement in that sense, just as you were doing with your association as well, right?
Well, we also see that we quite strongly grow in the printing and paper industry, and what you see is by certifications, you get also this value stream connection. So your knowledge of the industry is growing, and also of the materials. So certain suppliers already been assessed by other companies. So your knowledge is growing. So we have quite some the administration. It's getting more. In some cases, you get more easier information from our databases.
I think a lot of what we see and hear around, and Nathan is making the point about it becomes administration heavy. I think one of the most important things for anything, any kind of standards or labels or certification, is working with data that already exists. And by that I mean, in our particular world, it's about energy. It's really about your energy usage. Well, you should expect a business to have a pretty good control on its energy. If it hasn't, then perhaps sort that out, and then you can start looking at reducing your energy usage and your carbon. And then you start, okay, if I'm now going to start looking at my supply chain and looking beyond what I do in my factory, I'm going to need data for that. So I've got purchasing reports, I've got statements from suppliers. And I think the really important thing is most of that data that anybody needs to understand their impact, with the help of Charles or whoever it is from a third party, we know that data exists. It's just about asking it just in the right way, just at the right time. And it doesn't have to be, it's not a scary thing. So that data's already there. If you work with the right people, it's not admin heavy. It should be reasonably straightforward. And then you can very quickly get into the point, okay, well, now we know what the data is. We know what the data is telling us, as Tom said. Then, right, what are we going to do about it? And that, I think, is the really interesting thing. It's provoking the questions. And it's not necessarily at the end about having a label that says, tick, we're good. It's about having some data and some insight that says, okay, well, great, now what can we do about it? And it's having those intelligent questions back from, we get it from people like ImageCo. Oh, what can we do? What else can we do? Well, we know this, so therefore we can help you here, as I know Charles does.
It's like having a driver's license. When you get your driver's license, it doesn't say that you can drive very well. You need experience. And also in what you see is in the industry, the connection, by getting more connection in these kind of platforms and exchange information, it's really helping the process on sustainability.
It's almost like you need a supplier standard and from our point of view, a provider standard. So as a print house, that we have one standard for where we're working with suppliers like yourselves, and they have that standard. And I think it needs to be very difficult to obtain as well, because if it's easy to obtain, then you're just gonna kind of accelerate greenwashing, and everyone's gonna have this badge. You need to work for it, and really, almost like a gold standard badge. And it's just not anybody can have this. So there has to be a lot of work there, but without all the the administration work.
And want to bring you in, John, as well, because in terms of that accreditation, it's a look at kind of what goes into that as well, because I think from one of the issues that came out of the survey initially as well was that education point. And if we do have a at the moment, people that work with with you, Nathan T, or John or Charles, these are people that want to be doing something more, and it feels like, is that enough going forward? Do we need something that kind of gives people kind of a kick up the bum to say we need to be doing so much more if we are going to meet the goals, and whether that's our own sustainability goals or wider goals. So maybe John, on in terms of the people you work with, they kind of come to you because they want to do something, or how's your kind of interaction with people that want to work with you on that accreditation?
It's clear from the opening conversations that it's a very complex issue throughout print management. So I agree with Nathan on the point of, I think we need a number of standards, eco standards. One standard just wouldn't cover the wide range, and I think the collaboration with industry experts who can create those standards and raise the bar to a position of where they are hard to obtain. Isabel's point of where's the appetite? There needs to be the appetite there, and not just a prick of the moral consciousness to want to have this standard. There's got to be a need for it there. But I think regarding the waste management, and this is one of the challenges of many regarding an eco standard, is there's such a diverse range of industry within graphics and processing and waste produced, recycling materials that are produced, but in large and small volumes, which can or can't be recycled depending on where they are geographically, or if they can be commingled or segregated. The variance is astonishing. So to create an overarching standard would be realistically to follow the waste hierarchy, which would be to minimize disposal and maximize recycling and reuse, and and no production of waste at all. So I think and that's what we try to do is with the accreditation, is bring transparency, and that's what you would achieve as well with partners in expert positions to create this, to help with the standards, because you'd then create an environment of transparency and openness. And I think a lot of the underlying problems that we have is with the greenwashing word is it's difficult to establish the reality from all the marketed hype, and how do you create that credible voice of this is real against all the hype of, well, we're pretending this is real, but the noise is the same. And I think once we can establish that and dampen down the non-realistic claims, such as we're providing recyclable material, the fact it's not being recycled at all is overlooked, and whether that's willful blindness of it being overlooked or it's just ignorance, I think bringing that transparency forwards, that would help create that standard.
Yeah.
If I look at our organization, on the institute with certifications, especially for also the printing industry, we actually behind the phase of early adopters. I mean, and we already have such a growth now, so that there's quite from products from inks, paper, coatings, printing concepts, and books which get certified now. And what we also see in our certification holders, that we have quite enthusiastic people which are they start cooperations, exchanging informations. Have a look at the print to change platform. They are exchanging information to help your sustainability grow in the segment. So those kind of initiatives are there, and I think they are we should embrace them and give them all attention, and across the whole sector.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got a lot of questions coming in, so not ignoring any questions, but obviously it's a big discussion with a lot of us, so I will try and kind of bring them in as we can through the conversation, but also that I'll make sure there's some time at the end to kind of go through some of these. I think if I just go to Laurel here, we already have labeling schemes that work for print. We also have a dedicated standard for reporting what should be included in an assessment for a labeling scheme. So I guess that maybe speaks a bit to what we've talked about with almost that kind of a la carte side of things, of that rather than one big standard, that there's a number of different things that work for different areas. Laura, please come back if you want to clarify that, and that's not right, but maybe if anyone wants to weigh in on the fact that we actually do already have labeling schemes, and maybe offer their thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think there are a lot out there. I mean, dozens and dozens and dozens, and I think one of the things that we strive to do, and to pick up on John's point, is bring transparency to it. So try to find very, very objective measures about things. We focus on carbon as as an important metric. It's the one that's going to reducing your carbon would increase our chances of not having so much bad climate change. But actually keeping that focus on that number, going from here, you start here, you go down to here. We offer labeling. It's not I don't think the most important thing that a business can do. I think the most important thing a business can do is to measure and reduce. Yes, they get a label, but I think it's most important how they describe what they're doing to their customers. And seeing, for example, the retailers or the big kind of brands asking the printing industry, what are you doing? I think the most valuable thing, because a lot of what the print industry does is B2B, I think the most valuable thing it can do is describe to its customers, the retailers, the brands, exactly what it is doing through a series of objective measures.
But that's already in place in a document that ISO we have worked on and developed for ISO, and the document actually specifies what you should communicate in order to tell people about your environmental impact, and that information can then be used in an eco label anyone you like, whether it's Blue Angel or the Nordic Swan, whichever one it is. I would say, though, anybody that wants to have an eco label should make sure that it's a fully accredited certification. There's no good going to I don't know, company ABC and saying, can you certify that I am an environmentally sustainable business? Yes, they'll say, give me £10,000 and I'll give you a label. You can't do that. You have to go with fully accredited certifications, and you have to decide which ISO standards you want to be certified against, or indeed any other standards. So we have an environmental management standard in 14001, which is updated every few years when it's reviewed. We have a standard for calculating things like the energy usage of a digital printing press. We have a standard now for communicating environmental criteria to a labeling scheme. We're also working now on a document that helps an individual business to assess and communicate and measure its environmental impact over time. We're focusing at the moment in the first version on the environmental sustainability, but then that also supports the other two pillars of sustainability. So the tools are there. That's not the problem. The problem is getting people to use them.
Yeah, I think in our experience is also the ISO 16759. I think I've got that number right off the top of my head for the carbon calculation of graphics products, which is the standard we work to when we're working with Nathan and the team at Carbon Quota on calculating the carbon footprint of the printed products that we produce. The difficulty is whilst there is a standard in the methodology for calculation, there isn't necessarily standard in the data used in that methodology. And what we found that leads to is where you can have the same methodology, but different data coming in for different factors, which then lead to different calculations. And so I'm very much of the opinion that carbon footprinting can be a really powerful tool and a powerful way of providing a standard that's comparable across the print industry and crucially across other sectors. So like comparing an email with a letter, for example, I think it's important their carbon footprint calculations follow similar methodology and scope. The difficulty we have at the minute is everybody being on the same playing field with access to accurate data. Because I agree with your point. I think that the methodology is there and it's reported on and it's to an ISO standard. Finding organizations, interestingly, to audit you against that standard is quite tricky. But it's the data that flows into that standard, which is the sticking point in my experience at present.
Yeah, thank you very much for that input. We published, ISO published 16759, I think in 2013, was it?
Yep.
And then we reviewed it in 5 years ago, and it's up for review this year. So I made a note to make sure that we need to make the data methodology more robust in 16759. The other thing that we will add to it is something more on scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. But I would urge anyone who's interested in this stuff to join the UK Mirror Committee for ISO. We meet twice a year at the BSI in Chiswick, and we also have hybrid meetings. And it's your opportunity to tell me what we should be putting in these documents, because I convene the working group that's responsible for them. So if you're interested, please get in touch and we can sort out getting more people on the committee to work on these things. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. And also there's someone in the chat has asked, Laurel, can you share the references to the standards that exist for energy, eco labels, etc.? Although I don't know who that was, so maybe they can connect with you.
I'm just looking at that, Karis. Do you want me to just say what the numbers are and then everyone can write them
Perfect.
down?
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, the one for calculating the carbon footprint of a print run is 16759. The one for calculating the energy usage of a digital press is 20690. And that document is specific for long run print, so transactional work. There's an equivalent 21632, which is for energy measurement of wide format devices, basically any digital printing device that starts and stops on a regular basis for lots of short run work. 22067 part 1 is for general printing, and it's how to communicate, what you should communicate that that tells you that what you should communicate about your sustainability credentials, your environmental impact data. The document that we're working on for assessing your own progress doesn't have a number yet. So we're still very much in the early stages of that. But as I say, anybody who would like to contribute to this, and if you're on the committee, you get to see all of these documents before they're published and to work on them. We'd welcome any additional involvement.
If I can add, I think now we're talking a lot about carbon data and measuring energy efficiency and usage, etc. But I think sustainability is much more than carbon footprint or your energy usage or how efficient you are. I think it's also a lot about how do you work with your partners, ranging from customers to your suppliers, to your carriers or whatever, any stakeholders that you might have, which I don't think are valued through carbon in a way. How do you work with them to improve sustainability standards? So I think that's what, in my opinion, is then, for example, maybe lacking in maybe an ISO standard is then, you know, like what are more the soft sides or what are the actions that you're doing? And of course, it's very hard to measure then success. But I think, or at least I have the opinion that sustainability is about also acting in different ways that are not always quantitative, where quantitative data is available in financial numbers or carbon CO2 or emissions or whatever. And I think that's something which could be of high value in having a more overall print standard or guidelines, and that it also should be taken into account.
It's a more holistic view or not?
Yeah.
And is that, Charles, from your end, you kind of take that holistic approach as well? I guess one of those issues as well is joining that side of it up with everything else as well. I guess that's kind of a challenge.
Our standard has this holistic view where we really focus on the product by the safety. We have a restricted substance list, so all materials which are harmful for people and planet. That's also the most intense part if you get to analyze your product. And then also on the circularity, we assess the product on the circularity, but also on the process, if it is how you can proceed and improve towards the future. And next to that, we have it is responsible made. So we look on social fairness, water and soil stewardship, and clean air and climate protection. So this and for every of the 5 sectors of parts, we give a qualification of how you perform in this.
Yeah, and I think that's important, that holistic view as well. I know Nathan T, that's something, you know, that you guys manage in terms of, you know, from I think we were talking where the tree is from through to, you know, end of life, and kind of joining all that up as well is important. And you also need people to want to do that as well.
Yeah, no, there's the environmental side of it. And environmental, everyone's right. It's not just about carbon. There's water impact, there's forestry, there's raw material extraction, there's all sorts of things, and there's waste and landfill and all those horrible things that happen. That's one side of it. And the environmental side of it is it's measurable. It's quite you can measure it quite well. It's the softer side of it, which is that, you know, how the industry engages with people. You know, is it paying a fair wage? Is it looking after, you know, is it responsibly caring for society? There's all that kind of side of things as well, which is really important, really hard. And perhaps that's where something like B Corp comes in as well. You know, you've got your ISO 14001, which, you know, it gives a very strong kind of environmental management system, puts the right things in place to then go off and perhaps do a few more things in a bit more detail. But on the other side of things, you've also got the societal, you know, are we behaving as a responsible citizen? You know, is this business a responsible citizen in the world? And I think there's 1 or 2 people on this call have got experience of B Corp, and I think that's another interesting angle to take a look at as well.
Yeah, I think if we come on to that, I've got a question here from someone called Simon Biltcliffe. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Maybe Tom, you've heard of him?
No, never heard of him. No.
Never heard of him. No.
B Corp have managed it with purposeful business which is much more nebulous / ambitious and have a real worldwide movement, which people pay more for the products if you're a B Corp. Print could raise its ambition. People will pay more for demonstrably better eco products. Do the panel think this will be the case as well? So maybe if we start there. Do the panel think it's the case? I'm going to go to you, Tom, to talk a bit about maybe his weigh in on that. But also, you know, also as well, I do want to make sure we get your thoughts, as then carrying on for what Nathan was saying about that B Corp advantage as well.
Yeah, sure. I think so. Today, will people pay more for more sustainable products? Yes, but not everyone is the answer. I mean, we had our latest contract win was with a customer who required us to calculate the carbon footprint of delivering their contract, which was something I haven't seen before. We've seen sustainable initiatives in public sector procurement, starting to see it in private sector procurement, and now it's getting to the point where they're asking those kinds of questions. So it's going to start becoming required of businesses to be able to do that kind of thing. I think that now, you know, people within procurement at large organizations with a big print spend are starting to have sustainability directors and people like that on the boards who are giving them KPIs and targets that they need to hit within their procurement across scope 3. So yeah, it will get to the point increasingly, I believe, that people will be willing to invest more in sustainable initiatives. However, I don't think it necessarily has to cost more to be more sustainable. You know, I mean, Nathan mentioned earlier, you know, it's your energy is a huge contributor towards your carbon footprint. So if you're reducing your carbon footprint, you should be reducing your energy usage, which can in turn reduce costs. So I don't think it has to be as clear cut as sustainability, being sustainable costs us more. I think it's more about education, being aware and buying smarter. So in answer to Simon's question, yes, currently, yes, I think some organizations do, and that will increasingly become the case in my view.
I think what most procurement professionals, and I think if you accept that the print industry reacts to what the procurement and purchasing folk are asking for, I think what they're increasingly asking for, the evidence we've seen, is that they want their suppliers to demonstrate that they're taking this very seriously. I think that's the most important thing, that they want to see, have you got a handle on your water uses? Have you got if you're in the fabrics and garments, have you got a handle on what's happening in your, in the social side of your supply chain? Can you demonstrate you're doing something about carbon? Can you demonstrate you're doing something about water? And I think if companies can do that, then those will be the companies that win in the end. And I think you take a retailer or a brand, I think they kind of accept that they can't feed from the bottom anymore from the suppliers that are just operating at a lowest cost, and it doesn't matter whatever else. I think they're accepting there are minimum standards, and we are going to shop from that minimum standards and make that marketplace that has got these minimum standards in place and are measuring and are looking and are actively demonstrating they can do the right things, buy from that marketplace. And that's where they want the competition to be. They don't want the competition to be in this crazy non-standardized way. Equally, they don't want it to be in that space. There's a handful of companies out there that are so really take things to the far level. It's almost perfect. It's almost zero impact, but it's so unacceptably costly that they can't sell it. And I think you have to get there is a bit of a balance in the middle there.
But sustainable claims make products better and brands stronger. And so it's not always about the cost, but it's also leverage your organization to a higher level. And what we also experience that companies get more aware about certain things in their organization and things to improve.
I agree completely. And we should also recognize that the cost of becoming sustainable and of working towards greater sustainability is one that we have to bear. Everyone has to recognize that we have to bear that cost, because otherwise the planet will fry. And most people are recognizing that, particularly big brands that we've worked with.
Yeah, but it's also, if you have brand owners, but also if you are getting more to commodity level, then you see people will ask more about cost. I mean, it's obvious.
Yeah, it's inevitable. You'll always get that, but we have to work hard to push the standard up. And as this becomes more normalized, the cost will go down. At the moment, it's expensive because there aren't enough companies offering the types of services that you offer, not enough companies that have invested in certification, for example, and accreditation. That will change over time, and then the costs will come down.
I think
Rules of
ultimately as
supply and
well.
demand.
Sorry, I think ultimately those that do invest, and you know, as much as there is an outlay, in the long run you will benefit. Like we've invested in solar and we get a payback over so much time and everything else that we're doing. But when the brands do start shopping around, when they have to look for somebody more sustainable, those people who have invested, who have put the effort in, then we are going to benefit. And we, you know, we are a case of that. It wasn't when we started doing what we're doing, it's because I acknowledge the damage to the planet the print industry is doing and what my company is doing, and I wanted to do the right thing. And I wasn't that clever to see it as a good business opportunity back then. But now it's changed, and the reason I wanted to get ISO 14001 in as a standard is to kind of cement what we are doing, and we don't go out there greenwashing. So going back to the point of the label, you know, it needs to be hard to obtain and measurable as well.
Exactly. And I think you'll find, and I've seen over the last 15 years, more and more companies that are striving to be more sustainable because it's what their customers expect. So it isn't a cost, it's an opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have to go, but I want to say thank you for allowing me to join in.
No, of course, absolutely. I was going to ask a couple of other questions. I think something maybe we can carry on.
Yeah, no, it's just me that has to go. Goodbye.
Yes. Sorry, go on, John.
Yeah, from that position, Nathan, unfortunately, is the minority currently of people that see the benefit of environmental credentials, sustainability over cost. The overwhelming majority in the real world of smaller printers definitely still have to look at the commercial aspect first. You know, I see it day in, day out. It's from a recycling waste perspective. Recycling tends to be more expensive, especially for the smaller guys, because you've got economies of scale, which more than not halts the conversation immediately. You know, they'll look at the commercial aspect all day long over the environmental aspect, and there is the larger brands and the larger companies are looking at it more and more. I agree with that. All the, you know, especially over the years and years that I've dealt with the print industry, but you've still got the vast majority of smaller businesses and SMEs will always continue taking the commercial road instead of the environmental road. That's how I see it realistically. You know, the trend's changing, especially in the graphics industry, because the sustainability is such a strong message and it's so near to the end user. But it's still a lot more hidden than it would like to be.
What's the kind of solution there, John? I guess it's, you know, certainly an issue of transparency, an issue of education on why it's important.
Well, it's a complex issue, isn't it? And there's a number of fronts to approach it on. Education is definitely one of them. But like Isabel said earlier, appetite. You know, I speak to the smaller businesses. Their appetite for sustainability and proving that to their clients is far less than a larger business would be. And that a lot of them, you know, the number of businesses, let's take Sign Digital next week, there's maybe 80% will be small enterprises, and you know, the education isn't really there. They think it's too much of a leap into the world of sustainability and are scared off by it. They think it's just for the big boys, and they're the big companies that will benefit, and it won't be overly costly head for head. And maybe that's a reality. Certainly with waste and recycling management, you know, the options are very limited, and if they want to make a difference and then project that through their marketing and business profile, it's going to be more costly.
I think again, it comes back to where you start. I think if we go to you, kind of Nathan SB, you've said you wanted to it was because of your thoughts on what would be the right thing for the planet. If there was kind of an industry standard or even different standards in different areas, would that have made you feel differently, or was it purely, you know, and then kind of how do you get started? Did you think, oh, I'm going to do this and measure it, or I'm going to do this because I'm going to hit this standard or meet this mark? Or, you know, you said you with ISO 14001, you looked into that. What was the different, what was kind of coming in terms of what was because you wanted to hit a standard and what was because you wanted to kind of visually see where you've made a difference?
Yeah, I mean, it started off very ambiguous, I think, when, you know, I just literally flicked a switch watching David Attenborough and seeing all the ocean rubbish floating about. And I just thought, you know what, we're a big part to play in this and I need to change. I'm in kind of a position to be able to change that. So I just started kind of with media, you know, simple media choices. We, unlike paper and board, where, you know, where Foamex, well, we were Foamex, still use it sometimes, vinyls, lightbox fabrics, loads. We might use like 10 different products a day. And I had to kind of start on a journey looking to change that. And over time, you know, then it was reaching out to our clients, like some of the big brands, Adidas and people like that for things. So, you know, educating them on, you know, we've got this material, have you thought about this? But back then it's like the cost difference was really high. So it was almost like a this or that. We had a sustainable option, but it was very expensive. Now I think everything's on par, and we've made those changes as standard. So recycled fabric, you know, Zanita board instead of kind of 10 mil foam PVC and MDF, things like that. And just gone on a journey where, and then obviously we had a strong marketing message as well. And from my point of view, I see a lot of greenwashing out there. I wanted to do, you know, with the ISO 14001, I want to make sure we are monitored, that doing what we say we're doing. And it has been expensive, but like I say, it has had its returns now, and it's where we are because of those efforts put in. But yeah, it's I think along the way as well, meeting carbon quota and people like that, measuring what you're doing is vital to have, you know, those baselines and where you need to propel yourself as well. I think we were measured at 64 tons of CO2, which we had an offset. We offset that with carbon credits last year to become carbon neutral. Now the whole carbon neutrality thing is becoming a thing because of Greta Thunberg said it's not the right thing to do. So these guys are going to measure our carbon, and we're going to see how we can improve. Do we need more sales guys in electric cars? You know, do we look more locally for a supply chain? We try to not get from China now, buy from China. We're trying to keep it within Europe, and just those small differences. But when you measure your scope 1 and 2 emissions, like we've got solar, we're 40% powered by solar, we've got renewable energy contracts, and all this is measured and measurable, which again, going back to the standard, we need that measured data to then go on to any kind of print standard that might exist.
I think just picking up on John made an interesting point earlier about the smaller businesses, and, you know, bearing in mind, I don't know what the stat is, but I imagine that 80% of the industry is made up of SMEs or something. It's going to be something like that, right? And those are the ones where, you know, help is needed, and it's probably got to come from government to an extent, you know. And there's not much legislation, there's not enough legislation out there which forces a behavior change. The bigger businesses can afford to invest time and afford to invest people in it, and therefore you can do some of those more optional things. But I think there's still a way to go from government and legislation to say, right, there's, you know, landfill, recycling, energy for waste, all of these different things, putting some rules in place as you can and you cannot do this. And it's the same with water usage, with a lot of things. I don't think print is considered a particularly high. Overall, it's quite high in its carbon. Overall, it's quite high in its water, but it's not considered a high usage. It's not governed like the oil and gas industry is governed, or like farming is governed. Print doesn't have any kind of too many legislation, apart from the obvious kind of chemicals thing. I think there may be hopefully in the next few years, it's more guidance. We move more towards that way.
Yeah, I think the current approach that we've experienced anyway with the government is it's more carrot at the moment, and one day it will turn into stick. I mean, speaking in the UK, you know, our local authority put on things like net zero accelerators, where it was, you know, grant funded, so it was free to attend. You had free webinars and sessions on understanding, you know, educating yourself on scope 1, 2, and 3. Then even donated time for a consultant to come and sit with you to look at your scope 3 emissions and assess them. And so that required a bit of time investment on your part, but it was free support from the local authority around where we're based. But there are quite a lot of those schemes out there in the UK at present. They just need to be looked for and sought out. They're not particularly well promoted.
We've been guaranteed quite a lot especially since COVID, just from the local council, just giving us, they know what we're doing. And sometimes we applied for a grant, we couldn't get one for solar, but just other bits, just keep throwing bits of money at us. But there are, if you look for it, especially, I think it's a good message for the smaller businesses who are quite scared of this. There is funding out there available for certain things, not everything. A lot of it is productivity funding and, the kind of machine investment, but there needs to be more in the way of sustainable development as well. So people can, taking that leap into being more sustainable. I think it should be more readily available.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm conscious of time. We've got a great deal of input from people here, as could maybe be expected because of the topic. I don't know that we'll necessarily have time to go through all these. I'm sure you guys have access to the chat and can take a look here. I'm sure everybody on the panel is fine, I hope, with people reaching out perhaps on LinkedIn and asking these questions directly or asking for more information on those. I'm just trying to have a look through, see if there's any I can get to. A few of these things we've referenced. Laurel came in and spoke about 14,001, so I'm sure she wouldn't mind either anyone reaching out to her if they want more information there. Just having a look through. I think, we discussed a few of these things. We've discussed those costs as well, bringing those costs down for businesses. And I think, one of the outcomes that I think we've talked about is the fact that there are some amazing things out there. There is that kind of, different kind of a la carte style, picking the kind of standards or the processes that are right for you, rather than having one standard. And I think Nathan T as well, unless there's that force from outside the industry, that kind of government force and kind of driving that change, then perhaps it's not going to could be something we see. Is there any from the panel kind of final thoughts on what we've discussed, or if anyone's had a chance to look at anything from the Q&A that you want to reiterate? Because again, it's such a if we could keep going for 5 hours, I'm sure we'd all be bored and hungry, I'm sure, by the end of it, but we may have got to even half of the talking points that I noted down from talking to you yesterday that we haven't had a chance to get to. But if I give you a chance to
what we also notice is a driver behind certifications is the retail. The retailers also want to give their consumers a choice for their purchase decision if it is a sustainable produced material of a product. So that's also something where we also, for example, to books, that they want to go to certified books and printed books. So that's also a driver next to the legislation, so it will come sooner or later.
Just as a closing remark, as you asked, Carrie, I think the important thing to say is that the print industry can do something to improve. It's in a pretty good shape at the minute, but there's a long way for it to go. And I think it's to the energy and these kind of discussions that can kind of help the industry move along. Some of the big people aren't doing enough. Some of the small people can do a lot more. So I think it's these kind of discussions that helps everybody just step forward in an organized fashion and really make really keep the industry really make the industry proud.
And just to jump in on the points that we had around small businesses, because it is difficult to do, particularly when you've got several day jobs and lots of different hats that you're wearing at the same time to get products out the door. But the two things I suggest is, first of all, looking at what local authority schemes are on offer, because there likely will be something there that can add value. And the second one is, we talked around the more holistic standards like B Corp, is to set aside a couple of hours to go through the B impact assessment online. It's a free assessment that you can do, and off the back of that, against the B Corp framework, it will provide you with a really good gap analysis of areas where you could potentially, if you wanted to, improve against the B Corp standard, and that's free to do.
I think one final thing for me is how it is difficult, and there is so much. Sustainability covers so many angles, and it's a minefield. And I think only I'm happy to speak to anyone out there on our journey. equally I'm learning, you know, all the time. So if anybody has, you know, there's been quite some interesting things pop up that, you know, I don't know. And I think from anyone wanting to start that journey, don't be afraid not to know. And it's just a continuous learning journey. But by reaching out to you know, to everyone, collaborate, things like sessions like this help accelerate that and give you that drive as well. So I think it's important to, you know, we're down at Sign UK, myself and John next week on a panel, then I'm over at HP in Barcelona next week on the panel, and just open sharing what I know, and hopefully, like I say, learning from others as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Fantastic. Well, I think that takes us out of time. Again, there's a million more things that I was hoping we could touch on, but we only have a certain amount of time. There is a lot of questions here. I've kind of made a note of these questions and comments as well, so I'm hoping that we can follow up with some of you and follow up with our panel if they're willing to give us more of their time than they've already given. So hopefully we can follow up on that, because that, I think with these, we've got 23 open questions or comments here. I think that would be another whole hour webinar to go through those, but we will follow up with some of you guys. So yeah, I just want to say thank you so much to all of you, Isabel, Charles, John, Tom, and the Nathans, both Nathans there as well, and to the EcoPrint guys letting me be the host and have a chance to lead this discussion. Please do go to ecoprint.events for more information on EcoPrint. The summit is happening this June. You can get tickets there as well, and you can find other great content. And as I said, this conversation has been recorded and will be available to rewatch and catch up on as well. So thank you so much to all of you, and thank you to everybody that joined us as well.